So, to talk about unflattening, I really want to start by telling you what I mean by flatness. And by flatness, I didn't mean something literal. I meant this sort of, I meant patterns of thought, patterns of behavior that we're trapped in. A place where we sort of forget what might be and we're trapped in how it is. You know, we have lots and lots of options in life, but maybe they're already chosen for us. And because I had this word unflattening, I was thinking about it in terms of comics, and I'll come to that later, I turned to Flatland. And I'm guessing folks are familiar with the 1880s novella Flatland by Edwin Abbott. Regardless, it's the tale of the geometric inhabitants of this two-dimensional world. So they know how to move east and west and south and northwards, but they have no concept of upwards. They can't conceive of anything that's off the plane. And so we can all look at Flatlanders and put our heads down and say, oh, that's kind of silly, you know? But what is upwards for us? What are the directions we can't go, the dimensions we can't think about because we lack that way to see them? And that became a real burning question, you know, how do we get out of the narrowness of our thinking? And I think, and I'm in a school of education, I think a lot of what's going on in the institution of education is causing a kind of flatness. Education as recipe, education as a series of steps of things done to us rather than things explored. I don't think it's intentional, but I think it's the nature of this institution. And I think it's everything from our learning being put into boxes, whether it's the boxes of subject, the boxes of time, the boxes of space. You know, learning, it's all in these little boxes. And so I think we start to take those boxes into ourselves. And so somebody who studied art and studied mathematics and maybe happened to play professional tennis is seen as an odd thing. But I think really we're all very complex creatures, and it's the boxes that are artificial. And so it's really a pushback against those boxes and at things being lined up in rows. And specifically, it's asking why does 12-point font, double-spaced, 1.5 by 1 by 1 by 1 margins, why is that what learning looks like? Why is that what counts as scholarship? It's not to say that's not good. It's not to say there's something wrong with it, but to say why is that the form that counts and everything else doesn't? And I think we can go back, and on this page I do, as far back as Plato and his distrust of images as shadows of shadows. And we can look at Descartes, and we won't spend time on Descartes, but Descartes completely throwing out the senses and say that we're thinking machines. And certainly these rows of text work well for thinking machines, but maybe not so well for how complex humans are. And it's to say anytime you want to represent the complexity of our experience, you have to flatten it. You can't have the whole world every time I'm talking to someone else. So we can think about in the top there, the Mercator projection of the globe, which you're all familiar with. When you flatten it out to make the map, you know that Greenland's not that big. You know that these kind of distortions happen. And so you can look in the center there. This is Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxia map, where he puts it onto the globe onto an icosahedron and then sort of pulls it apart that way. And in his map, you see connections where the other one has divisions. And that's not to say it's any more accurate. It's just to say that these are different ways of flattening it out. We can think about it in terms of the weather. If I ask you what the weather's like and all you tell me the temperature, you're leaving out the humidity, which makes an enormous difference in Washington, D.C. You're leaving out the wind, which was nice to find here. You're leaving out the sun. You're leaving out all these things. So if we're only coding by one channel, we leave out all these other ways. And so maybe my biggest question became, you know, what are we failing to see? What are we missing when we're only allowing one way of thinking in our classrooms, in our scholarship? And what might we start to make visible when we bring in other ways of thinking?